Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, usually at around Tuesday or Wednesday nights, Eastern Standard Time, of course, and it also gets uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to do all the social media doobly-doos and leave that like, follow, subscribe, and review depending on the platform you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast. So today I am back with Team Blank, and we do have a decent meta tournament to talk about. So we're going to obviously be talking about the last BT17 tournament because, EX7 is just around the corner, literally launching this weekend as of the recording of this. But yeah, so we have BT17 to kind of just wrap up and finish and give our final thoughts on, and kind of just talk about the current state of the game, because I think the game is in a really contentious point. I'm just gonna lay it simple. I'm not really a huge fan of where the game currently is, and we can kind of just start talking about that a little bit more. But first, before that, we have the question of the week, and the question this time is going to be something, I guess, a little bit more uplifting. What are you guys excited for when it comes to all of the new product that's going to be coming out? Because unification is just around the corner and we'll eventually not have that knowledge. So given this opportunity, what are we excited for in the future? So anyone can answer?
Yeah, I can start. I'm looking forward to a couple of my fan favorite guys, getting new decks, right? Like Justimon's getting support. We know that he has stuff coming in 19, and we know that they're telling us they're finishing his stuff in EX8. I'm pretty sure announced that his X antibody form's in there.
Yeah.
So that all sounds really cool. I did like in EX7, I did like the Ice Snow stuff, and I did try and build it kind of as a pure deck, but it's just not there. It doesn't have the pieces just yet, even using older, Paildra stuff. So even that, getting its new pieces eventually will be really cool. Honestly, that EX8 set looks really cool. I'm interested to see who that new big guy is on the box art, but, that's where I'm at least.
What about you, Guardian? What are you excited for in the future?
Honestly, more regular ban lists. Because the fact that we're not lining up with Japan just yet means that they can't apply one ban list too soon without applying it way earlier than we needed to. Once the unification actually happens, I can see Bandai doing more regular ban lists, as both JP and EN data will be merged together. They can see, okay, now this is a problem. We need to deal with this now. Just the way we can actually stabilize the game.
Yeah, hopefully they're a little bit more proactive on that. And, I honestly, that's the biggest point that I'm kind of, you kind of stole my thunder there. But I do like the idea of I would like more frequent ban and restrictions, because I honestly, no shocker, don't think that the last one did enough, and there's still too many problematic cards floating around, kind of making the game not feel super great. So I'm not exactly super excited for the upcoming tournament that's going to be out on, September 26th or something?
Something like that.
28th,
28th, yeah, September 28th. I'm not looking forward to that because I don't like where the game currently is, and I was really hoping that the current ban restriction would fix a lot of those issues, and shocker, it didn't. It tried to. But as far as actual deck wise, I'm not super jazzed about any of the new stuff that's coming out. I probably would be more in the camp of, like, I think Blue Fishes looks really fun. Or like Blue Aquatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that because one of my best friends plays the deck currently, because he invested in all of that stuff before it started spiking because of the EX8 reveals. But
with Yao and everything.
yeah, but I honestly just am a blue player, so I'm always excited for when new blue cards come out. And as cool as blue hybrids is, like, I'm kind of over it. Same thing with, like, Imperial. I'm kind of just over it. And I just want something different, but strong and fun. And maybe Aquatic with that new keyword will be what I'm kind of looking for. And even similar to, like, Snow with Iceclad, I think, like, maybe there's potential there with, like, some blue hybrid support or whatever. So I think there's, like, a lot of, like, fun and interesting things to play around with. Whether it's actually good is to be determined, but they're at least fun and interesting. So that brings us into the meta report, because BT17 is done. Yay. I don't know if that's actually a good thing or not, but
It's not. It's just part 2. I've been testing the decks on the DCGO that Huang Zero has been making. It doesn't feel any different. It really doesn't.
yeah, and that's not necessarily where I kind of want the game to be, you know? But as far as the event, we actually had a big in-person regional, and it was, wow, a whopping 480 players, 9 rounds of Swiss, ran by Play TCG. This was the Bandai Card Fest, which is always cool to see that they are supporting more in-person play. And we actually had a pretty decent meta spread compared to the last time we actually took a look at the meta, where literally one North American event was heavily dominated by Imperial, and then we had, like, some weird stuff coming out of France. But this is kind of not really a shock on what decks actually did well. We have Imperial, Shine Greymon, Yellow Vaccine in 2 different variants, Leviamon, Magnamon X, Ancient Garurumon, Dexter Goromon, Ancient Greymon, Omnimon, and Fenry Lugamon Takamikazuchi, all doing numbers. So there wasn't one deck that was overly dominant. It was actually, you know, a pretty decent spread for once. As far as what came in first place, that was Dexter Goromon. This was running a black base, not a purple base, and this was similar, if not almost the exact same list as what we saw last meta report with Ben's list. So cool that that's doing well. Second place was Imperial, third place was Shine Greymon, fourth place was Ancient Greymon, fifth place was Yellow Vaccine. This was a Dominimon 3 Great Angels build. Then 6th place was Leviamon, 7th was Yellow Vaccine, this was the classic armor variant. Then 8th place was Omnimon, 9th, and when I mean Omnimon, I mean Omnimon DNA, so it's trying to do that whole 2 megas to line up into Omnimon Ace. So I guess I would just label it as Omnimon Ace, but 9th place we had another Leviamon, 10th place we had Magnamon X, this is the blue version. 11th place was also Magnamon X. 12th place was Ancient Garurumon. 13th place was Imperial. 14th was Shine. 15th was Fen. And 16th was another Ancient Garu. So as far as the Ancient Garus go, they were red base on at least one of them. And then the other one was also red base. So there were 2 red bases. Cool. Then when it comes to the Imperial, they are fairly standard Imperialists. I'm shocked that more people aren't running 2 Imperial Dramon Paladin mode aces. But hey, if it worked for them, it worked for them. And I'm also still not super thrilled with the starter deck Dragon mode. I get it, it's in there for more aggression, but it feels like it's such a win more rather than, like, actually trying to out the opponent and make it so that they can't play the game. And I would rather just make it so they can't play the game, because BT16 Dragon Mode is just significantly better. Both of the Imperials were on that. Shine, just as a quick note, was on a red base. They are still using a tiny bit of the new tech, so it's always nice to see that the new cards are having an actual impact on the deck's overall performance. Was there 2 Shine lists? Yeah, there were 2 Shine lists. Here's the other one.
One's red, the other one's yellow.
Yeah, the other one's yellow because they're using Patamon, because the Geograys are yellow vaccines. Shocker. And the rest is fairly standardized. Just going over those really quickly. I don't think the Magnas were doing anything different. They just had the promo, and that's kind of it. Yeah, promo, and then good level 7s. And maybe of, like, Ace, just because having another Ace is still good. What was the other Magna doing? Just, again, more promos?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, just more promos. Because the promos can proc the levels, the new Magnamon X antibody from BT16. And then again, just good level 7s. So, not really much of a difference there. But as far as, like, actually different decks that we haven't really covered a whole lot of, we do have some to highlight. We already mentioned that the topping #1 list was, if not the exact same, fairly close to Ben's 5th place list. And I honestly think, like, looking at this list and thinking objectively about where the meta is, this is probably the best anti-meta deck in the game right now. So, what are your guys' thoughts on it?
Which list?
This is the first place Dex Dorugora utilizing the black base.
That guy.
Yeah, because, like...
So, I was just playing this, actually, in the DCGO. Actually, it was really interesting with how it worked. I mean, you were able to grab Tamers and spit them out much easier, whether Digivolving or just... when their turn comes around. Playing around with this was actually an interesting way of doing things. So good for the guy that won. Good for the fact that this thing was something different than the standard Luga. And yeah, this was actually fun to play around with.
Yeah, so you have... It's odd to me that they're using Chikurimon as the floodgate of choice. I would think that with all of the memory shenanigans, that they would want to be on Chumon. So maybe that would be the only thing I could kind of complain about.
Honestly, their tamer count, though. So they have so many tamers that you're just left very susceptible to
you're susceptible to Death X. They also were probably expecting something like a lot more Agarus compared to their locals, so...
Yeah, because this does turn off Digicross, so maybe that was the point of contention. They're just like, you could do all your memory manipulating shenanigans. I just want to stop those instant response tools.
Yeah. Another thing that would really screw this deck over, and I felt it almost immediately, is if you had the wrong stack going, they could just simply drop the Digicross Ancient Gray and just basically pop what you were doing, you know?
Yeah, I think, like, the true MVP of the deck actually, unfortunately, is Mega German, because the deck is heavier into SOC synergy than the classic X antibody synergy that a lot of people would expect out of the black base, because you do have a whole bunch of good other Dorumons that synergize with trashing cards or digging for X antibody pieces, but the only unfortunate thing is the BT9 Dorumon only trashes X antibodies, which kind of sucks, so it's locking you more into wanting to use X antibodies. And then the draw 2 is nice, but no inheritable also kind of sucks. And at least, like, the BT17 has reboot and can warp. It's on attack, but it at least is able to do something to try to catch you up. And then the BT7 one misses your tamers entirely, so that kind of sucks, and that's a huge thing that this deck rides or dies by, is being able to see its tamers and get them set up, which the Airdramon plays out your Marvins and de-digivolves on a level 4, which is huge, because de-digivolve against a lot of blue decks is, like, actually important, because that's how you are able to break a lot of their protections. Then they also are running the Mega Dramon for when attacking D-Digivolve, which again is good. And this is the card that's also allowing you to set up even more, because you could put a SOC traded card into its sources, which means if it sees a Tamer, you could just grab the Tamer, and then you could go immediately into your Doragoromon to gain full value when you didn't have it before. So I honestly think that Mega Dramon's the MVP, and then nobody expects an ace out of this deck, so Mega Gargamon ace being one of the best aces in the game just kind of also makes sense.
No doubt on that. I mean, like you said, the Mega Dramon is the MVP because no matter what they do, if they ace, they still have to resolve all their effects first. So...
Yeah, and being able to pop the Tamers isn't too shabby either.
No. No, it is not.
So unfortunate though that I think it caps at 3, right? So can't hit those all important 4-cost Tamers. But yeah, it's nice to have some extra Tamer removal.
Yeah, that's
your big guy only hits unsuspended ones.
Yeah, but for the most part, it is Ben's list. There's not really too much to explain. He has a whole video if you want to go watch that on what he did. And shocker, the deck is somewhat successful on both ends of the spectrum. So congrats to the first place for copying Ben's list and finding the same levels of success. The next deck is going to be one that's going to be a little bit more unique, which is the 3 Great Angels deck, because not many people are actually expecting 3 Great Angels to be good. I definitely am not.
So as far as this, I actually watched the video of the guy who actually had this list going. So a lot of his stuff was just ride or die swing. Because it was mainly, he was trying to clear security as fast as possible with the barrier, and then just swarm overall using the 5 angels and up. Mainly using his Magna Angemon from 16, I think it was?
Yeah, it's the Magna Angemon for 16 that combos with Dominimon, so you can kind of do the little Domini loop. So that way you could be like, Magna Angemon, Digivolve into Dominimon, Dominimon, play out Magna Angemon, Digivolve into Dominimon, and kind of rinse and repeat. And then, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would want to take a slightly more aggressive approach, because without the usage of the BT14 TK, it kind of makes the deck a little bit more slower, or like people would think that it would be slower, so trying to utilize barrier to be more aggressive definitely seems like it would be more beneficial, especially since they have aces on level 5 and level 6. So if that level 4 sticks around, they try to swing over it, or like able to try to delete it in some other way, you could try to ace to save it and then ruin the opponent's play. So it makes sense. And I think that because of the protection that it's kind of playing around with, in terms of blue protection, you could try to like figure out ways to bypass their, like, to gain the protections that you need, so that way it's going to be harder for the opponent to actually do anything. Because what does Dominimon give in terms of protection?
Dominimon does not really give protection.
Would leave the battle area other than by one of your card effects or by battle. You trash the top of your security. So yeah, you just try to swarm, and then usually a lot of blue decks can only bounce one thing. So you don't care about losing your security, especially if you have like Ofanimon Ace or Angelomon Ace, because then you could just recover it. And then you keep your board, and that's the most important thing, especially against blue decks. Like, this definitely feels like an anti-blue deck, because you just get into Dominimon, and then if they don't have an answer to it, which most blue decks don't, then you kind of can just swarm and win off of Dominimon.
The other thing is the fact that if they miss swing on the wrong timing, you could also get cherubied and instantly get the swarm right back going, and just get minus like a Heaven's Judgment.
Yeah, I mean, they're not running Heaven's Judgment, but...
I said like a Heaven's Judgment.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Just one big DP reduction. And then the fact that Cherubimon, Ophanimon, and Angelomon are all like that premium DP reduction that lasts until the end of the opponent's turn really makes it so that it has at least legs against decks that do have that temporary type of protection.
I don't remember what Archaeanchamon does.
He's just a setup card. Like, that's really all he is. He's doing the same inheritable as Magna Angemon, so you have more consistency on making all of your Digimon also be blockers, which the deck naturally seems like it wanted to be a more defensive control-orientated deck, but the fact that this player was able to try to convert that type of strategy into something more aggressive is really good. It is kind of interesting that they're not running any emissaries. I feel like this deck would be really good with emissaries because you do have the Salamon to kind of set you up, you have the Cupimon to kind of set you up, and you have the Magna Angemon and Archangemon to also set you up. So you have a couple of different ways to be able to not just guess what's in your security. But I guess, like, if they were just like, yeah, Yellow Memory Boost is just more consistent to see cards, that's good. And then this deck is also playing Digimon Emperor because it has the extra space to, you know, just play hate cards, which hate cards are really good, which is why Floodgates are super important, like Pillowmon that they're running. So that way if they break partition, nothing happens because the Digimons can't get played.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like so far between this deck and Dexter Goromon, people are just really trying to, like, hose on Imperial more specifically, knowing that it probably is the best deck in the format.
It is the best deck. It is the best deck in the format.
Yeah, so I honestly feel like, because what place did this get? This got 5th place. So between, like, 1st and 5th place, they really just wanted to say, like, no, Imperial, you take a step back. Calm down for a minute. And then going over the Omnimon list next, I have actually personally zero faith in this list. Like, I know it topped, and I'm looking at it right now, but I've also, like, playtested with this deck, and I think the deck is just, like, hot garbage, and it's, like, extra high-rolly. But this list, compared to some of the others that I've seen, is a little bit better because you do have more rookies to play around with. So you have the Ukamons to search, which that, like, card draw in this deck is, like, actually that important. You do have a whole bunch of different Agumons. They're running less of the Gabumon because when I was playing the deck, I think I was higher on the Gabumons and I was bricking because of Gabumon, which was really weird because I can't Digivolve him because the egg is red. So I always had to hard play him, and that sometimes just didn't work out. Then they're just playing, you know, the good old classic package that everyone knows and loves, the Greymon, the War Greymon, both the rare and the secret rare, and then same thing with the Metal Garurumon, the rare and the secret rare. Based on the list running Supreme Connection, it really wants to hard play the Metal Garurumons and Digivolve into the War Greymons. Which makes sense, because you do have Agumon to try to, like, get you there a little bit better. And then they're also running Fireball for more card draw, and I'm curious on why they're running Matt, maybe for more card draw. Yeah, it's just another search tool for Garurumon specifically. They don't necessarily care about the other effect. The other effect could come in handy, don't get me wrong. And it's a Matt by name. But it looks like they're just running Matt for more card draw and Tai for more card draw. So they're just trying to draw into everything.
It's also likely just another blue source that they need to play the Miraculous Mega Knight.
Oh,
they're running
that's
4
right,
of it.
because it doesn't have a
it doesn't have a clause, yeah. Wow. Unfortunately, so you always have to have color for it.
The interesting thing, oh yeah, the black tie for the Supreme Connection. I'm like, how are they getting Supreme Connection out if they're only running like one Gabumon? Oh, well, they also have the Agumon.
It's the Tai, the Agumon, the Greymon.
Yeah. So, okay, it's starting to make sense.
Gabumon.
Yeah, because Supreme Connection will at least be able to dig you out your other Metal Garurumon. or like specifically dig for Metal Gurumon, but the delay effect to be able to reduce the cost of playing a Metal Gurumon is like actually huge, because hard playing a Mega, expecting your mat and ties to reduce it down to a reasonable level just means any further reductions is just that much bonus.
Yeah, because it changes your math to basically be 5 cost. Which, if you have a mat and tie down, it's going to refund you 2 when you get your War Greymon.
Yes.
So every extra mat, like tie and mat, like eventually just gets it there for free. So
yeah, I mean, it's just those small optimizations that really show you that it could go a long way, because this is a deck a lot of people were just like writing off as like some like for funsies deck. But Omnimon Ace is honestly like actually a pretty good card. It just sucks he doesn't have protection. So like the idea is just trying to kill the opponent and hope they don't have a response, which some decks do, some decks don't.
well, that's entirely like why the Alter B's in here, because if you get that full combo, it basically just like 5 to zeros people.
Yeah, it does. So good on Omnimon being able to do something, and the people are being inventive with the builds. I wonder if you tested your Blue Flare build, because I was seeing like Omnimon builds kind of prop up in like other packages. So I'm curious to see if you got your Blue Flare version to actually work at all.
It has seen some level of success. My big issue is that like with the 2 cores, like having only like the barest bit of like crossover being the Greymon name, like it does make it sometimes hard, because like there'll be times where it is very nice to like play those Metal Greymons for basically nothing. Like, it's pretty sick, and it gives you another like alternate way. So like you play the Metal Greymons, they rush in, they can like stun the board, you can get checks that way, and then you can put Metal Garurumons on top of them to then extend into like War Greymons and stuff like that, as well as War Greymons can go on top of blue Metal Greymons because they have the Greymon name. So I like it to a degree. It just seems like it's been hard sometimes, like seeing pieces. Like if I get slow starts, like it's just hard to like find the card draw, and maybe that means I do have to like pare down some of the pieces to be able to add in just like straight card draw cards.
Yeah, that's why they probably were running the fireballs, because when I was doing some initial testing on the deck, I was not running fireballs, and I definitely was having some card draw issue. On top of the fact that, like, in testing, I played against, like, somebody who literally was running, like, the BT5 Rookie Rush deck, and I lost literally because they rushed me down because I gave them too much memory off of playing my cards, and they didn't do enough to remove bodies. So I was just like, well, I guess I just lose this. And I was kind of, like, stunned for a bit that, like, BT5 Rookie Rush can beat this deck if it doesn't see its card draw like fast enough or do anything. So I was just like, okay, that's a feeling I never want to have.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very fun when the Omnimon like shovels an entire board back into the deck, though.
Yeah,
it does feel pretty great.
No, I've had
great
some like
for you, annoying to me.
I've had some minor success with it, just nothing major that makes me feel like I would be confident in that deck actually doing well. I know we're kind of just like poop talking it, but it is cool to see it is good enough to a degree to be represented, and that's what we're trying to highlight more than its issues. And then moving on to Red Hybrids, which actually just converted itself to Ancient Greymon, because, shocker, red removal kind of just sucks. So being able to just delete things is honestly the worst type of removal. So what Red Hybrids does now with the Ancients is they're more just punch. I just punch. That is my game plan, is punch. So they're using a combination of the Ancient Greys from BT7 and BT4. BT4 replaces itself with a Digimon, which ideally is going to be like a Flamemon, so that way you can continue to dig. And then the BT17 replaces itself with, you know, adding a level 4 hybrid to your hand, well, I guess technically any level hybrid to your hand, and then being able to add another tamer and play the tamer for free. It's just any tamer, which is absolutely crazy on making sure that you always have a tamer in play, which is really important. And then they just both have security attack plus. The BT4 just gets more security attack plus than the BT17 one, but BT17's replacement is better, so trade-offs. And the deck is just an aggro deck. It's just, let me punch. That's it. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just punch.
Yep.
Tamers kind of reflect that. They're not really running the Warp Takuya that much because he's not very useful. He literally doesn't do anything for the deck outside of just, hey, my trash is full. Let me just shove 5 Tamers underneath and then just go full combo. And if you're ending off with BT4 Ancient Greymon, then you could just check all of their security off of that, which is funny. But at that point, you probably should already have checked a decent amount of security, so I don't know. But yeah, it's just punch. I don't know what else to say.
There's nothing really else to say about that.
Yeah. And then the last deck we're going to highlight is something we haven't really seen in a while, and that's going to be the Leviamon deck. And it's cool to see Leviamon do well because he can run a decent amount of like tech packages. So I'm going to kind of like try to show off both at the same time. So you do have 2 different builds that are doing the same thing differently. So hold on, let me see if this shows up. Okay, cool. So both show up. So you have one that is focused on more so the floodgates and trying to use Lotmon X antibody and a lot of like just other synergy. Like basically the low end is different, but the high end is the same. So it's just Goblimon and then whatever merry band of friends that you want to play with that you think would best suit what the deck is trying to do. Then you're just trying to go into level 4s to try to have good tempo plays, and then lead into your level 5s to set up the opponent's Digimon or your Digimon, so that way you could go into your level 6s for basically nothing and wreck their whole field. It's the same exact deck, just done differently compared to when we last saw it last. And I think it's just another really good deck because if you don't have the proper protections or outs to what this deck does, it kind of just auto wins games, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. Not gonna deny that one at all.
Yeah.
I still fear Levia whenever I see it. It's just like, oh god.
And this is why I feel like if you're a blue deck, you kind of do just need to run Imperial Dramon Ace, like fighter mode or dragon mode. No, Imperial Dramon Paladin mode Ace. Gosh. Because there's fighter mode Ace and Paladin. And I think like Paladin being able to just hose on the trash can really screw over a lot of not only just black decks, but purple decks too. Because black also tends to play a lot with its trash. Red kind of plays a little bit with its trash, not to that great of extent. And because deletion is just bad, red is like really not super playable right now. But purple, because its deletion at least is a little bit better and it has more than just deletion going on in terms of the removal type. It's just the better of the 2 colors. Same thing with black. Because all 3 deal with deletion. It's just black has de-digivolve. Purple, just has a whole bunch of stuff it could do for free. And deletion is just part of it. And then red is just only deletion. So it's cool to see these older decks still stick around with good innovation. Are they both running 4x? One's running 4 protos, one's running 3. So I'm just trying to like look at what their minor differences are. They do have some, but not a whole lot.
I think the other thing, though, on why Red's not being very successful is that its deletion ends up being DP based, and right now we're in a meta where like there's just high numbers on DP, and black is going off of like cost. So like,
which aces have a lower than
have
average
a lower
count.
cost. Exactly, but they have the same they tend to have the same DP numbers that you'd expect on the right level Digimon. So It makes red a little harder to deal with stuff.
I definitely can see that. No, I definitely can see that. Because if everyone has DP increases, and Red's whole gimmick was, trying to delete by being weaker than it, but they're not, then yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to me. So that's kind of it for like the overall meta and where things kind of are. I think like BT17 still to me has yet to actually prove itself to be like, we could get the diversity, but the diversity is at the cost of the overall health of the game, and that's kind of one of the major topics that I wanted to lead into is like, are we actually better with the current ban and restrictions, or are we potentially better without them? Because if the game is still unhealthy, and whether we had it or not, like, does it actually matter at this point? So
to a degree, I think it did matter. Like, I think mainly the hit to Magnum on X is the most important aspect. Like, curving down the vaccine traded deck, right, with the TKs being gone, because the TKs were such a powerhouse card in the Armor Vac deck. They made multiple functions like really good, so they were a great setup enabler, as well as on other turns they could just be the way that you re-triggered Magnum on X with like very little investment.
yeah, because like, so in my perspective, we went from like, the only reason, in my opinion, why Numemon was good was because it was the deck feeding off of Magnamon X. And because Magnamon X was that good, it was kind of limiting whatever else was playable to either you have an answer to Magnamon X or you don't. And if you don't, you kind of lose. And Numemon just feeds off of everything else that was able to beat off of it, which limited the pool that was, actually viable, because now you had Magnamon X to deal with, and if you couldn't deal with Magnamon X, you had Numemon to deal with. So, and Numemon, yes, was moving a little bit on the faster side. So I think like maybe it's hard to say, because with this current ban and restriction list, it obviously made Imperial the best deck in the format, bar none. It has answers to basically everything in the entire game, and can move faster than almost everything in the entire game when it's set up. Its setup was, yes, arguably one turn slower than Numemon's setup, but it's arguably harder to stop once it gets going. And as a result, because of Magnamon being, like, or not Magnamon, Numemon no longer being around, and Magnamon being weaker, it kind of left this, like, vacuum that blue decks seem to be eating up, and right now we're just in my opinion, the format where can you beat blue? Like, that's honestly what it feels like, is can your deck beat blue? And I don't know. Like, it feels like it probably is healthier, but it doesn't feel healthier.
Yeah, I think the issue is that blue's just kind of a toxic color.
No doubt.
So it having removal that like tends to be softer, being like bounce to hand, like means that because it's softer removal, they're more willing to give it to things, as well as you'll see it like have like higher reaching like effects. So Zudomon ended up being the strongest level 5 ace because he was doing a soft removal, meaning bounce, but because of that, like his condition is like pretty easy to meet, having no sources, where we just got to a point where like he also already strips too, so like he punches up pretty well. So like he's the only ace that can, like level 5 ace that can actually deal with Digimon of higher level than himself. Most of the other ones can't even like deal with something of comparable level for the most part. Like both the Metal Greymon and the Lilymon that came out at the same time as him, like both had pretty shallow like removal, and the Lilymon effectively like her removal never mattered because it had to hit 6k threshold and be suspended by the time that it came down for you to actually bottom deck it.
Yeah, and back then when we just were getting aces, It was more, can your ace out my ace, and Zudo was the only ace that could, because level 5's hard playing for 4 is, like, insanely efficient. It's crazy good.
Yeah, and especially if they have, like, actually good on plays like Zudo did.
Yeah, and then it just puts heavier emphasis on level 4s, and this is kind of where I think, like, where the game is developed, like, aces slowly became kind of toxic, because it's, like, the interaction we kind of wanted, but it's not the interaction we needed, you know?
Like, and I think blue being, like, a very popular color and, like I said, kind of toxic, like, hits on, like, the fact that, like, it also got to eat up, like, the lion's share of, aces. So, like, they have a ace in Vikemon that gives them, like, black's keyword removal being Digivolve, as well as it does bouncing.
Yep.
Which, I don't know that blue needed all of that, like, and they're the only deck that can effectively use it. And that card was very clearly printed for blue, like, so sure he's supposed to be the top end for, like, the Shaco deck, which doesn't have blue in it, but I think we all see that he's more so set up to, like, be the headliner for the, Gomamon, like, Zudo and, Ikakumon deck that they were trying to build.
True.
So, like, he's just incidentally, like, blue, and now blue gets to take advantage of him if they so choose.
Yeah, on top of the fact that they have fighter mode ace, which is anything with less sources, just gets straight up bottom decked. That's really good. And then they also have a level 7 ace, which there's not a whole lot of, so that just straight up says trash, be gone. So that's really strong, because that kind of eliminates the drive for players to want to play, like, black or purple decks mostly, because if they see fighter mode ace, or not fighter mode, paladin mode ace, they're kind of just forced to go back to square one, and that having all of your setup just magically disappear off of nothing is, like, absolutely crazy.
Kind of the reason I had to hang up birds for, like, the BT17 format, like, because especially after the ban list, I was like, oh, Imperial's, like, kind of the best deck, and it has, like, a natural out, and it was already a hard matchup for birds anyway, so, like, what reason is there to keep trying to play it if now I'm going to see more of it? And they have, like, better answers to anything I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And especially, like, we kind of already covered this, like, the 4 best blue decks are just leaps and bounds better than a lot of the other things, which is why this format is basically, let's try to beat blue, because you have Mirage, which is one of the best OTK decks in the entire game. You have Magnamon X Antibody, which has the best protection in the entire game, on top of pretty good removal and some other shenanigans. Then you have Imperial, which has answers to literally everything in the entire game, on top of the fact that the last blue deck is... now I'm blanking on it. I had it in the back of my head, but now I'm blanking on it. Imperial, Magna...
Mirage, and then
Mirage.
It's Ancient Garu, right?
Oh, yes. I keep forgetting Ancient Garu. Yes, so Ancient Garu, which is just one of the best aggro decks in the game, that just can draw a lot and plays off of hybrids and has instant response answers, and just is able to also bypass a lot of defenses. Yes, that is the other best blue deck. So between, like, those 4 blue decks, like, it's just very hard to navigate what deck you should be able to play, because not all decks have answers to those 4 blue decks, but those 4 blue decks have answers to almost everything else, which is really sad. Like, granted, Mirage has the big weakness of it dies to aces, which is unfortunate, but that's just Mirage's big weakness. So, yeah. It makes it so it creates an environment that's really hard to navigate, which is why, like, sometimes we could see these wide fields, but other times, as we saw in the past, like, the field is just really actually that narrow. Which is why, like, I'm having a hard time with this format as a whole.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's a lot of it's due to the toxic nature of blue, where, like, blue just kind of doesn't care. Like, its type of removal being soft means that they're like more readily gifted it. So like it's just gonna do its thing. Whereas like a lot of the other decks like have to fight for like removal that's harder for them, right? Like so like Red's big new thing, right? After they originally their thing was like DP related deletion. They still kind of are on that, where now the new thing is, oh, Red deletes the lowest DP Digimon. And so if you can control the board and like kind of finagle with what's on your opponent's board, you can then use that to actually delete like really big things, as long as they're the only thing on the field. So like they end up having pretty good removal for like narrow situations, which right now that doesn't tend to be the case. Like a lot of decks, the strength is going wide, so it makes like Red have a hard time doing any of that. Green like has a very strong removal in bottom deck, and then just like trying to beat over Digimon, right? But like attacking is bad in the card game right now, so
Yeah, because of
attacking
Ace
over
Digimon.
guys is exactly. So attacking over guys is not the best right now, especially at certain levels. And bottom decking is great, but because it's so strong, it's very conditional. And like the guys that get bottom decking either have very hard conditions to meet to bottom deck something, or are your like top end guys that because it's green cost like 5 to Evo and do.
Yeah. And, like, that's, again, kind of where, like, certain OTK decks are kind of struggling right now, and that's why, like, if you are one of those green decks, you better have good enough protection to be able to, like, buy yourself one turn in order to make those power plays. And that's why, like, Grandis is doing really good, and Rabbits is doing really good as, like, some of the more premier green decks, because, like, they just naturally have some of the better protections against most other things. Which is really unfortunate, because, like, as, like, just, I've said it before on stream when I was playing Mirage, like, more excessively, like, honestly, in order to beat that matchup, either aces, good security threats, or Rapidmon X, or not Rapidmon X, starter deck level 5 Rapidmon kind of just auto wins you those games, and it's just crazy to think about that. Like, how important those protections have became, and it's that way for not only just Mirage. Mirage, I think, is, like, the worst of the 4 blue decks, because it does have those issues, but you have to take those same types of concepts and apply them to almost every other blue deck in order to try to have an answer out to them.
Right. And, like, the only other color that I think is, like, the only other colors that are nearly as toxic as blue have to probably be, like, yellow and purple. Yellow just having free extra resources because they're one of the only colors that gets to use the trash well for purple, and then yellow getting to manipulate security, which isn't the strongest mechanic, but man, is it so slow in the card game. Like, and needlessly so.
Why do I
Because
have a feeling you were attacking me there?
No, I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking Bandai. I'm saying, Bandai, fix your card game so that when I recover into security, it's all the same thing. Like, it always does the same thing. I shouldn't have to be like, oh, is this one where I have to recover and then shuffle everything? Or is this one where I recover to the bottom? Like, is this one where I, like, have to shuffle everything and then I get to recover? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why do it that way? Just have it so that every recovery just does it one way.
Well, also, going on to the yellow topic, just the fact that they also have some of the best removal, because a lot of their premium DP reductions are now sticky, means that you could just bypass defenses if you just stick enough of it, which puts heavier emphasis on more specific cards being played because they have those types of sticky removals. So, like, and because it is a game mechanic, say, like, literally the game itself is stating this Digimon cannot exist on the field, like, that just is the best form of deletion compared to all of the other forms of deletion.
Well, the thing is that, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because the guys that want to get deleted still saw that they got deleted, and the guys that had deletion protection have deletion protection, so they'll be able to stave it off for, like, the moment or two they need to.
Yeah, because there is those, like, funny instances with Dexter Goro where it's just like the math doesn't work out, where it's just like, oh, I got deleted.
Oh, you got me exactly at 0? Yeah, I'll just go up and I'm now like 1k higher.
Yeah, which just throws your numbers off, and then I just remove your Digimon because of how Dex Doragora works.
Hmm.
Or with Nikki getting pissed off at me, Mastimon just saying, "Nah, you don't exist. Get out of here."
Yeah, but this is kind of like why I think like looking at the like this top 16 for this past event kind of emphasizes like everything that is right and wrong with the card game, because if you look at like all of these decks, they do have some very underlying issues that they're like very clearly highlighting, and like that's why these decks are the ones that are actually topping, because like I said, Imperial counters basically everything in the game when it goes. It only loses when it bricks. Then you have Shine Greymon, which the new Shine Greymon has probably some of the best protection next to Magnamon, which then there's Magnamon, where it's just like, yeah, these are just very hard to deal with cards. Then on top of that, you have like Dexter Gora, which is fitting in that like niche. I can counter the best decks because, you know, Digivolve is just that good. If you get his protections off in the full stack combo, he's borderline untouchable. And it just becomes a situation that's very hard to deal with. Like, you can kind of start seeing this returning pattern of these decks are just very hard to deal with because they are just mechanically, I guess, too rich in a way. Like, they just do too much too quickly to just shut down whatever the opponent is trying to do. Because looking at some of the other decks, you have Ancient Grey, which is just a big punch deck. So you just punch for all the security, ignore the opponent's game plan almost entirely, and that's also what Omnimon is doing.
Yeah, that's the other thing exactly. Is so you see like 3 other decks in this like top 16 breakdown are just OTK decks. They don't care about what you are doing. They just want to do their OTK combo.
Yeah. And it really starts to paint a picture where it's just like, do you have protection? Do you have speed? Can you out protection? Or just ignore the entire game as a whole? Like, it's not necessarily the greatest picture to paint when it comes to looking at objectively what is actually playable.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like brings me to think about like why or like how we even got into the situation. And like looking back at past formats, because I do have the data for that, BT15 was the healthiest, like in terms of deck diversity in the entire game, but BT13 was probably the healthiest in terms of actual gameplay.
I think so too. That's what I would say. As we go on to that next topic of like peak era, I think it's BT13.
Yeah, so like this really got me thinking on when was peak Digimon. Like, what really made me super excited to want to continuously nonstop play Digimon forever. And like, we had some good formats and we had some bad formats. Usually the bad formats are the Nationals formats, where it's just like, yeah, these are arguably the most toxic, and they're so bad, usually right after Nationals, there's a ban and restriction list to hit the cards that were problematic for Nationals. So those are probably...
Which is just going to be coming around the corner again here in a minute.
We still got some time. We got a couple of sets and we got some time, because we got, like, what? 4 or 5 months before Nationals? 4 months. Yeah, we got, like, 4 months before Nationals.
Yeah, because the Card Fest is going to go through December, and then we got Nationals in
January.
Late December, early January.
No, it's in January. I still don't have the information on what Nationals is. Everyone is speculating it is everyone's speculating it is the Card Fest in Florida, but
yeah.
I have not, there is zero confirmation if that is actually true. So I have not booked my flight for Florida, and the second I do is the second I will.
I still need to try and win because I have 2 reasons for the Florida trip. One of which is personal, the other which is cards.
Yeah, I feel ya. But as far as like looking at some of the healthier formats, usually it is the formats that come after a ban and restriction list, because they try to address some of the problems before more problems emerge. But that's not necessarily the case all the time, because as we can see, like right now, the game just, to me, doesn't really feel as fun to play as it was in BT13. Like, I've been on record, and I've said this multiple times, that BT13 was peak Digimon because the designers understood the power dynamic and speed control of the game the best. And I think, honestly, that's where my interpretation of peak Digimon lies. I don't know if that's true for everyone. Feel free to tell me in the comments below if, like, what you define as peak Digimon. But this is where I hate the argument of, like, oh, you're just a boomer. You want to go back to the beginning of the game because you hate training cards. And I'm like, I'm not exactly saying that. That's not true. I just think training cards created such an unhealthy play pattern and speed balance that was just utterly destroyed because of their existence.
The other thing is that they, of course, like, ruined multicolored decks. So, like, you can't be a stack-based deck and have been, like, split between two colors, like, properly split. Like, sure, Bandai's been trying to, like, kind of fix that, and, like, a lot of archetypes now, like, end up just having the dual color, like, all the way through them. Like, Leomon, like, gets to have all of the dual color stuff for everything, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to it being, like, properly mixed. But, like, BT13 is the format where, like, Mirage was a proper deck. It was, like, finally it's time to shine, right? Like, everybody had been holding on to their BT11 Mirage cards and, like, man, this card's so sick, I can't wait for it to do something. And finally that chance came. But it didn't have, like, all of the pieces that make it, like, as crazy, right? Like, you were missing, like, the X4 piece that ended up getting limited, is how good it was, right?
Yeah.
You were missing trainings, which, like, just let you, like, accelerate and, like, skip turns, basically, to, like, get to that OTK. You didn't have the jamming that now the archetype has, like, built in, as well as, like, that jamming egg that, like, was so obnoxious that also had to get limited. Like, Shine Greymon, people were complaining about that, like, oh, Marcus just makes it so fast, but, like, it was still a Greymon deck, and Greymon decks just inherently, like, are big dumb stacko decks that, like, they build a stack, it did a cool thing when it first came out, and then it's kind of just a thing that sits there.
Well, the funny thing is, like, actually looking at the BT13 numbers, Marcus, in terms of his topping percent, like, numbers he was able to produce, he wasn't overly dominant to where some of the more unhealthier formats of the game are, where it's just like, okay, when a deck usually hits about 30 or 33%, that's when we're getting into unhealthy territory in terms of, like, how my metrics worked out. Which is mostly just representation out of all of the top 16 decks out of larger events, like more mid to large size events. That's usually the simplest way I could explain, like, my metric, because that's the only realistic data that we have that I can, like, commonly pull from. And Marcus wasn't that overly dominant. He was the best deck, but he wasn't, like, Mirage was basically neck and neck with him, and then underneath that was still around 20 decks. So it was still a pretty wide format, and the best deck wasn't overly the best.
Right. And it was mainly because, like, back at that time, like, those decks were both so much slower. Like, to, like, actually get, like, a full OTK with Mirage, you needed, like, multiple tamers, you needed, like, a lot more going on.
And I think,
than, like, what it is now.
And I think that's what made it more interesting of a format. Not only was it just slower, so there was more action and reaction time, but, like, because it was slower, it was also, and because there was, like, a lot less efficiency in the game, that's honestly where a lot of, like, the issues that we're kind of seeing now rely on, where it's just like, oh, Imperial, off of one tamer, one Digimon and raising, one memory, you could go into a level 5 multi-attacking, end your turn on a level 6 to shut the opponent out of the game. Like, absolutely crazy. Like, decks are just, like, right now, absolutely ballistic because not only just the training cards, but because training cards made stack-based decks that much faster and more consistent, they had to make all of the not stack-based decks also more consistent and faster to be able to compensate for the fact that training cards exist. Like, this is why I think training cards did more damage to the game than good, and this is partially why I think Block 3 was an entire just functional design mistake, is because it took the fine balance that we had in BT13 and just completely destroyed it. Not to say, like, ace cards also are a huge contention point, because ace cards right now are getting into problematic territories. They were fine at first when it was just a couple of level 5s here and there doing some cute little things that can slightly disrupt the opponent. The game wasn't overly fast enough, or like the removal and protections weren't high enough where that was like a game-breaking thing. But now, because you have level 5s that have really good protection, it makes it that much harder for us to be able to remove the level 5s, which makes it easier to use Ace Digimon on top of goading effects that we've obviously seen are able to just abuse Ace Digimon, where it's like, yeah, I goad your Digimon off of this one, and you're forced to attack, and now that gives me a free ace. Like, they have become such a, like, toxic point because of just how players have started implementing them and how much stronger aces have gotten. Even, like, rare aces right now are still some of the best aces. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And, like, I get that Block 4 feels, based on all of the spoilers that we have seen, it feels like it's trying to slow the game down. But honestly, like, looking at a lot of Japanese data right now, the best decks are still the best decks that we have. Like,
It had been for quite some time, even in Japan.
Yeah. So, just going over some Japanese data real quick. Right now, the number one deck is Mirage, or not Mirage, Blue Hybrids, like Ancient Garurumon. That's still the number one deck. And they are on, what, BT... They're about to get BT 19, right?
So they got 18 not too long ago for them.
Yeah. So, in BT 18, the best deck is still Imperial by a pretty decent margin. Not too far behind that is Purple Hybrids, which is a newer deck. Then after that, it is Demon Lords, because Shoto is an absolute stupid card, and they only made Demon Lords better with more Lucimon support. Then after that, we have Imperial. Shocker. After that, it is Mirage. Are you any listeners picking up a pattern here? These are all decks that we've seen before. Numemon still was. This is probably skewed because a lot of these Numemon decks were playing with before the restrictions. So Numemon still would be up there if it didn't get limited. Then we have Fenri Lugamon, Takumi Kazuchi, just one of the other better OTK decks. This is Yellow Vaccine. It still sticks around. Like, you could see, like, everything that I've said right now is not in EX7, except for Shoto, for Demon Lords. So, like, it really starts to paint this, like, picture where it's just like, yes, Block 4 is supposed to try to depower the game to get it into a better state and position, but at the same time, what we still have is just that much more powerful than everything else that they're trying to come up with, because the designer who did Block 3, I believe, basically left, and the designer for Block 4 is the one who's trying to pick up the pieces. And there's a couple of fumbles, but for the most part, I like the idea on trying to depower, but they have to do more to the ban and restriction list in order to actually depower the game. And I feel like what they're trying to do is just give you enough new tools and new shiny things to kind of create like BT8 syndrome, where it's just like, we're so sick of the top decks that we just want to play literally anything else. And if they hit the top decks when we're playing with new shiny stuff, then it doesn't feel as bad because we're not on those decks. That's what they did with Blue Hybrids all the way back in BT9, because in EX2, we learned that Blue Hybrids was still the best deck, and it probably was the best deck even in BT8. We just all unanimously agreed that we just wouldn't play it. So maybe we're going to be hitting that type of situation, but I don't know. I feel like something should be done, and it's not going to be done for a while.
Problem is that like with as it seems, like you look at what most of the support looks like in the upcoming sets, and you're like, wow, some of these like individually look really strong, but like the vast majority of them are like too wonky. Like the fact that Susanamon, one of the premier secret rares of the set, right? A fan favorite Digimon, a big boss guy who like has an entire like OTK strategy like built around him, is not a real deck. Is not a deck people are playing because it's too hard and wonky to try and get to work. Like that's a bad sign. Like if one of your like set sellers isn't actually seeing his deck get built, like that's not good.
Yeah, set design definitely has never been Digimon's actual strong suit. Because, like, just like what you were saying earlier with, like, you really want Hexablaumon and Iceclad to kind of be a deck, but it just doesn't have a second evolution line until, what, Blue Hybrids? Yeah, like, well, you technically could use Tommy's stuff for Blue Hybrids to be able to make it work.
Oh, in BT18, yes.
Yeah.
But they're pretty wonky, and they're very much trying to do their own thing. Like, they are just support pieces that are that incidentally have the tag. But, like, at that point, that makes them as good as the Sorcerermon that you get in EX7 right now.
Exactly.
So they basically don't do anything for you. Like, they just happen to randomly have the trait, because it's not like they are more ice-clad or anything. They just are ice-snow pieces that are supporting the Frontiers deck. They're supporting the Takuya Susanamon deck, and that's it.
Yeah. And, like, I appreciate the attempt at a lot of these cross synergies where they will have like more wider trait specific stuff. Like you do have name based archetypes, you have trait based archetypes, and then you just have decks that are made for you, basically, which are the clock decks. And it's really interesting to see like they're trying to do these like multi-leveled support to try to make the card see more play based on the different types of archetypes that it could fit in. Like this, again, is why I hailed BT13 to be one of the best metas and best sets, because you had a whole bunch of Royal Knights, and you also had a whole bunch of Royal Knight decks. So it's just like, oh, these can go with the Royal Knight decks, and they could go in their own specific deck itself. And I thought that was a really cool, neat idea and concept to play around with, where you have cards with multiple decks that it could go in, and that aren't generic and breaking the game in half like what we have seen in before Apocalypse. But besides the point, it honestly feels that Digimon is trying to re-find itself, and I appreciate that Liberators is trying to be that centralized focal point to figure things out. And we do know that, like, Shoto, as an example, is going to be getting more support for his deck, because right now, his deck, it's cool that we got a starter deck and the upgrade pieces to go alongside it with EX8, or 7. And then EX8, we get more support when he's back into the limelight of the story. At least if they're trying to actually time the releases to the sets, because I don't think we've seen some of these characters yet in the story, but we eventually will.
I think so. The two EX8 characters, they're novel side characters. So if you're a novel reader, you might have seen those two characters, like Yuki and I can't remember his name right now, but like they're on that side with Violet and no, not Violet. Sorry, with Yuki and Winar.
Yeah. I mean, I eventually will have to go read the novels. Have you read any of them?
I only read the, like, when they released, like, the early chapters. So, like, her going to the volcano zone and fighting the Lynx Dragons. That was about it.
Oh, so that's why the Lynx Dragons are in the Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was that any good?
it's okay. Like I don't know.
Was it
Like
Seekers bad, or was it better than
no,
Seekers?
it was better than Seekers. So
Okay.
like there's like more effort put into it because Seekers' big issue is that like they translated it, but they just like did Google Translate basically, and like weren't asked to like go back and like fix it so that English like readers like it flows correctly.
Okay.
Because there's different flow right in Japanese, right? Because so like they'll put certain like nouns and like verbs in different spots, like when they're speaking, you know.
Yeah.
So like sometimes they didn't go bother to go back and like fix stuff like that. Whereas like they did a better job and it was a little cleaner. And I think maybe they learned from that mistake and they're willing to take the time to actually like clean it up. So hopefully that continues to be the case. Like on the strength of writing though, like it didn't feel like anything like that groundbreaking or special. Like you get like the base like understanding and characterization and everything to the point where you're like fine with it. Like the visuals in the comics like help a lot. Like they help me better understand and like characterize like Shoto as opposed to like being in like Yuki or Winar's head for the novel. And I think it's just like to me, Digimon has always been a very visual medium because it started for me as an anime and then like video games and everything. So like it's hard for it to just be text on a page.
I get that. So at least it's better than Seekers, because Seekers was kind of a hot mess, and I think like they're definitely trying a little bit harder. They obviously could try harder still, but at least a little bit more effort and love and attention was put into anything with the Liberator tag. And like I honestly think that's like a good thing that they are trying to go back and like do things the more proper way when it comes to trying to make it a multimedia like franchise. We just need an anime, so Bandai, get on that. Like, please, can you fire the tell the studio making that garbage Great Escape anime to just actually go back to making a good Digimon anime.
Also, Bandai, I want to know how Zenith won and became the world champion of Digimon, because the support you gave him, his deck doesn't seem like it's there.
But the question is, would that deck be able to beat like BT? What is it? I'll just say BT13. Black War Greymon.
I don't really feel so. Like, I think Greymon had less DP back then, but like, if you're playing, because at that point you were playing, you had all your ties and you were still maybe playing Yuki's, but like you had less DP overall through your like evolution line. So maybe like the Galactimons were big enough, but I feel like they don't hit the numbers, right? Because Novemmons give them boosts and they cap out at what, like 13 or something?
Galacti, I thought was base 14.
He might be. Yeah, he's base 14. Okay. Yeah, and so like I think that they would have hit the numbers big enough to do it, and you would have had all the like tamer hate. So like his special tamer of himself, because that's the other thing is that like I don't know. Do we know that they were playing like in the like Liberator like deep dive world, or was that like supposed to be like with official cards at the time? Because we know that Owen like had to go off into Liberator and like find himself and like figure out how to like be better at the card game again after losing his title, and that's how he found like Elizabethmon.
Oh, is that Digimon's name?
Yes, she is Elizabeth. It is Elizabeth Dramon or something like that.
Oh gosh.
So that's how he finds that. But so I don't know that he would have had his special like unique tamer, because they only have those unique tamers in the Liberator world, because they can go through events to build their own unique tamer to like better suit their decks. Whereas I would assume that he would have had to be playing like stuff like we were playing in the Galactimon deck, like when it was ever like okay, being like the starter deck tie for Dragon of Courage or something.
So I guess You could probably just assume that they didn't have their tamers, but they had every other card. But I mean, that would have been nice to have some clarity on, like, yes, how Zenith actually won with Galacti versus Owen on Black War. Would have been nice to get more clarity on that, but I guess it's just a minor detail that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Maybe this is Bandai's
the champ now, though.
Yeah, maybe this was Bandai's message on telling us give up on Greymon, because so far Greymon has not been that great. He might get there, maybe.
We'll see. Hopefully they give Zenith more support so that he can, like, actually that title can mean something. Because, like I said, the fact that he just got a Venmon and a new Snatchmon, like the Snatchmon, very needed, but like that's all he got. Like, he got a tamer and a rookie and a champion.
Yeah.
And we called it a day.
So, I know we got a bit sidetracked there. And, like, thinking about it, honestly, like, if you were to try to fix this format with another ban and restriction list, what would you do?
To be honest, I would just say, like, Paladin mode, just go. Like, so, sure, all of the topping Imperialists were only on one of it, but, like, even one of it, I think, just feels bad. Because it just gives you this piece that, like, doesn't really need to exist. Like, why should we have a silver bullet for all trash-based strategies in the entire card game? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And then they put it so that it can evo off of blue and green, it can evo off of the Imperial name. So, like, it technically has a home in every blue deck, every green deck, and you can play it in the Virus Imperial. For, like, no discernible reason.
It is a bit goofy of a card, and this is the problem we've kind of started seeing with, like, 3-color cards, because Magnamon was a very similar way, where it's just like, yeah, it can be played in any of the armor decks because they all stem off of all 3 of the colors, and now because it can stem off of 3 colors, it can be played in a lot, not to mention more colors, because Duke, like, the 2-color shenanigans, so, like, a deck that's not actually blue or green, like, purple can technically play this because they can splash in, like, a purple-green mega, and still have access to it. Like, it is just a really, I do agree, it is just a kind of a goofy card. But that's just the problem and, like, the big initial fear that I had with 2, now extending to 3 colors in general, where it's just like, when do colors start mattering again?
So, like, I felt like Omnimon Merciful Mode, like, it had, like, a proper cost associated with it, right? Like, it cost, like, 6 or some nonsense to go into it off of, like, every color but purple? Purple and black, maybe?
Yes. It was, it was purple and black.
Yeah, so, like, it cost 6 or, like, 2 on top of an Omnimon. But, like, to already be an Omnimon and then put an Omnimon on top of it, that was a lot back in the day. Like, you were realistically only ever doing that if you were an Omnimon swinging that had an X antibody on you. So that you could go into Omni X, like, and then do shenanigans that way, like. But to be an Omnimon, get back to your turn, maybe, like, because most of the Omnimons were very expensive, and, like, you ended your turn on it. That's why, like, Blitz Omni was, like, the best Omni for a while.
He still is.
Because he could still at least make that attack, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, Merciful Mode had, like, a real cost associated with it, whereas, like, this new guy, like, really doesn't. Like, to be honest, like, if you can just get him, so, like, you can just hard slam him for 9 against, like, Demon Lords, and then, like, everything they've been doing is just, like, ruined. And if he makes it to your turn, he basically is completely uncontested because all of their guys have no sources, so he can just keep swinging through and clear the entire board, like, easy peasy.
And Demon Lords also would have a hard time removing him, especially if you hard play him, because can't de-digivolve him, and Creepy
the only guy that hits
the
him
lowest
is
thing.
Yeah, so if he's next to something else, like, Creepy just can't hit him.
Yeah, so it literally would have to be done with old Leviamon, or, like, you choose to sacrifice it with Lucimon, or does the old Lucimon able to kill it? I think it might not.
I think it can. I think that one, it just, like, generically kills anything. Like, it kills a Tamer or Digimon, but I forget.
I'm double checking.
Yeah, but so like
level 6 or lower.
Level 6 or lower, so it can't hit a 7. So yeah.
Yeah.
But like I honestly think that like I like the idea of like smaller, more selective like anti-trash cards. Like I was at the time like when we got Black Auto Uber, I was like I really like this card. I like that we have something that can hurt like trash strategies because otherwise like they're too strong. But I do think that flipping their entire trash back into the deck at like no cost is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it does kind of just dissuade people from, like, if blue's already the best color right now, just because of where the meta is and the leftovers that we have to play with, and, you know, the decks that are being supported, like, it does mean that there's going to be a higher amount of Imperial being ran, like Imperial Paladin, and then that turns off a lot of purple and black strategies. So I definitely can see that card going to 1, even though most people are already playing it at 1, or just
well, that's the problem.
It.
That's why I'm like, there's nothing to do because they play it at such a low number anyway. So like, you can't hit it to 1. It's still the Saki 1 of that just immediately like in Commander, right? You have like silver bullet cards, right? Like, but like in MTG Commander, you're like, oh, I have 100 cards, and like unless I'm in very specific colors or it's a specific type of card in my color, like I can't guaranteed search it. Like if you're in black, sure, you can search anything the heck you want, right? Of course. So you can just pull out your silver bullets and like, but that's an entire format where like you have to have cards like that, like because you're sitting in a pod with like 4 other people, and everybody needs to technically have an answer to like this one guy's doing some kind of weird strategy where he like is looping cards out of the trash. Well, if somebody else has like a card that like makes it so that you can banish one of the cards he's looping, then cool. Like, you've saved the game for everybody at the table, and everybody's going to be happy with that, right? But Digimon is one-on-one, so, like, if I'm just trying to play my game, I'm playing the deck you gave me, Bandai. I didn't build some degenerate, like, pile. I'm playing what you gave me, and then you handed the other guy a card that just says, you're not allowed to have fun, and your deck's not real anymore, kid. What am I supposed to do, Bandai? What did you want me to do? Play that same deck? But then you don't want us all playing the same deck. You've told us that. You get mad when we do that. But what did you want me to do then? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, it's... And that's why, like, right now, that's kind of why we're, like, in this meta, more specifically, is beat blue or lose to it. Which feels really bad to say, because that's the problem that I'm having, because I'm a blue player. I'm having a hard time figuring out what blue deck I want to play. I keep losing at locals to literally the same 2 decks ran by... they're not the most optimized list, but because they're good enough with having the core pieces to make the decks function, like, they still can just very easily win, and I'm trying to play not decks that piss everyone off at locals, because I've only had 2 locals die on me before. I don't want that to happen again. So I'm not purposely playing the best decks. And then when I go and play the best decks, I'll sometimes brick and then still lose to not necessarily amateurs, but just more suboptimal play. And it feels bad just because, you know, of the deck that they're playing is significantly better than most others. Like, just as an example, there's a person at locals, he runs Eospawn. And it's just like, cool. He gets paired up against Ancient. He loses. Cool, he gets paired up against Imperial. He loses. It doesn't matter which of the 2 players are playing against him. As long as they're running blue, he loses. So it's just like, Eos would be a great counter pick if it actually, you know, had the ability to fight against blue. And it doesn't. And, like, I had another person on Pulsemon, and he sometimes finds pretty good success with Pulsemon, but that's only when he's OTKing with Takumi Kazuchi, not when he's just sitting on Kazuchi and playing Pulsemon. So it is just slightly awkward, where it's just like, obviously, sure, that's their problem for playing decks that don't beat blue, but it only goes to highlight blue is the problem, like, right now.
Yeah.
And if you
So I would
can't
just
beat blue,
get
you
rid
have to
of
beat
that.
blue.
I would just get rid of the paladin card so that you can open back up these other decks. Like, so we know demons gets to kind of play the game because they get that Shoto that makes other guys blockers and just means that like they don't have to worry about getting rushed down by like all of the like low to the ground aggro decks that were like pummeling them, which is nice for them. Um, the other thing is that like to actually affect Imperial, I think you'd have to hit the BT12 champions. I think
Really?
it's completely unfair that they got those pieces because Bandai, you printed brand new guys for the other two DNA decks, right? You wanted to support these new DNA decks. You even moved the Shakomon out of its original colors to these new colors. And the least you could have done is printed them the same level of support or better than what already this old deck had. Like,
That is
there,
kind of true, because
nobody
usually...
plays any of the new pieces, but for the other two decks, you have to play nothing but the new pieces. Like, you can't afford to be playing the old support pieces for those other decks. Like, you need the new Aquilamons, and then you need the new Gatomon, and then you fill in the rest of your holes with the Lynx and the Harpymon, because nothing else is good enough for your
that
old pieces.
So, would you rather have those get limited, or would you rather have the Tamer get limited to try to, like, not necessarily curb stomp Imperial, but to make Imperial slower and
To
more
be
on
fair,
par? Yeah, to be fair.
the champions. It would have to be the champions because I
Really?
think that the tamers inherently are fine. Like I think it's a little busted that like Imperial already had like stellar rookies, and the caliber of rookies that the new ones got isn't the same. So they're relying on the movie promos to like be about on par. But the movie promos, as we know, by the fact that Vmon doesn't play its movie promo, and the Wormmon promo is either not played at all or in very low counts, tells you that those cards aren't the right quality. And so they're relying on all these BT12 pieces, and I think it's fine. We can let them keep the rookies, and they can have the Tamer that spits out all those free rookies that gets them so much card advantage because they have the good rookies. But the issue becomes is that then they actually have to like be good with their memory. Because right now, like the game just rewards you for doing nothing. Like you slam down, you push up one rookie. Your tamer gave you a free rookie that found you the other piece you needed. You put one guy on that, and you put another guy on the other one, and then you Jogress, and oh hey, it's my turn, and I have like one or two memory.
Yeah. No, like, this is... I've kind of said it before in the past, like, and looking, like, I had a whole episode with one of my designer buddies talking about game pacing, and I feel like cards that just say gain a memory are some of the most dangerous cards Bandai can print in the entire game. Like, it honestly, that is the worst ability they could print on cards. Like, being able to reduce cost and gain memory might not seem like it's actually that damaging or that big of a deal, but and then you stack it in slightly unintended ways from when the card was initially designed, like, then it actually starts to become a huge issue. Because I'm 90% sure the BT12 cards were not designed in mind with the BT17 Tamer. Or not BT7, BT16 Tamer. BT17 Tamer is actually pretty good in its own right. It's just we don't need it because of all of the BT12 cards. So maybe you are right, and BT12 is the problem when it comes to Imperial support.
Yeah. Well, like, and it's the funny thing, right? Because what are the pieces from BT12 that we actually play? None of the high end, just the champions and the rookies.
Yeah, and before the champions, like, going all the way back to BT12, before the champions weren't even used, we were still using EX and starter deck, just because they were more efficient for what they were doing at that time, because we didn't have, like, the big end of turn DNA, gain a whole bunch of memory, gain an extra memory shenanigans that we had, and we valued some of the other abilities that the other Stingmon actually had. And now that we don't exactly need the card draw, piercing is just better. And we have more ways to be able to support that. It is just kind of crazy. So BT12.
I think when Bandai, like, if you build an entire, like, new support package, and you know how card games work, like, you tend to make things stronger, and if absolutely no one is using any, like, just about any of the pieces that you just handed them, you clearly messed up.
Yeah, because I do think, like, it is kind of weird, because usually when Bandai, like, makes a protagonist and then they support the supporting cast, they try to, like, have a similar design philosophy to catch it up. We've seen this with hybrids lots of times. Like, the new Koji we just got is basically the exact same as Takuya from BT12.
Oh,
And, like,
yeah.
Koji is basically just one set behind Takuya in terms of design philosophy. So it is weird to see that they just completely up and abandon BT12s, skip that, and then make an entirely new stuff for BT16 in terms of that support. So maybe you're right in BT12, like, hitting the level 4s is the correct answer to curb, to properly curve Imperial to where it should be. Anything else you feel like should get, like, limited? Because I know a lot of people want Mirage gone. Like, that's a no-brainer.
Like, I like the card too. I think the deck's sick, but, like, I honestly feel like I was telling you, like, and we've had this kind of conversation before on, like, other episodes, where he's just such a good card that, like, it makes it really hard to make room for any other blue guys. Like, Zheng Pengmon is a very cool card. It does a lot of cool stuff. But it's a very specific deck, right?
Yeah.
He can't just go on any top end, whereas Mirage, like, technically is a very specific deck, right? You want the strategy where you're getting cards into your opponent's hand, like, so that they have a high count, so that you're gaining a lot more memory, or so that you can, like, use the other effects, like, I have 8, so they have 8, so I can unsuspend, or whatever, right? Like, seems like a specific effect, right? But then you look at the Mega, and the Mega just says, on Evo, make them pick up a 5 or lower. If they don't pick up anything, they have to pick up a security card. So you still always get your effect. Like, the only time you don't get your effect is if you went down on an empty board and your opponent had no security. But at that point, you were going to win the game anyways, so who cares?
Yeah. Because I don't want to, like, I think armor vaccine, unfortunately, like, there's nothing really, or, like, not armor vaccine. I think, like, Vmon armor, there's not really much you can do to that deck at this point. I don't think it's doing anything egregiously stupid anymore outside of literally Magnamon X. But that's just where the card game is, and I think they're trying to add more counters to it, maybe. I don't know. So I think, like, for the time being, they obviously don't want Vmon to get hit any more than he already has for Magnamon. And then for Ancient, I really don't know what to hit in Ancient. Like, is it a tamer? Like, honestly, I don't necessarily think it is, because it's.
I think the problem with that deck
it's such a
is
small
that, like,
package.
it's that it doesn't matter. Like, realistically, the only thing you could argue hitting would be the Lobomon that does the warp. But then you were like, oh, we shift to blue base and we have another Lobomon that does the warp. And this one just does it on Evo. We don't even have to have the Kendo name. So, like, it makes the deck less interesting at that point. So, like, what would be the reason? Like, but I feel like, though, Ancient Garu is just a more balanced version of Mirage. Like, sure, you're burning security, like, more often, right? Every time you do it, you like, if he stays around, right, every time you add a card, you get to burn one from your opponent. But they're at least getting it to hand, so, like, you're not, like, fully denying them that card.
And it's not like the deck is an OTK deck either, so maybe it is just something on the lower end that they would have to adjust. But again, I don't exactly know what that would be, because they honestly could just take the playbook from red hybrids and just be like, yeah, I have my package, I still can technically play other colors packages. So there's always going to be something slightly degenerate about what the deck is going to do, but kind of like what you were saying, it is just a more fair Mirage where it is not an OTK deck, so you do have to think and consider a lot more than Mirage. Outside of,
Yeah,
or do they have Ace and can I get rid of their Digimon to prevent the
like,
Ace?
yeah, so like realistically, the only way you could hurt the deck would be you limit Ancient Garu to 1, but that's not what I'm advocating for. I don't think that that's what we should do. Honestly, Bandai just needs to get better about giving us more Tamer hate. If we had more Tamer hate in more colors, it would be fine. Because right now, the thing that makes that deck like so strong is that they sit on boards that are completely empty, aside from Tamers that got respawned by the like Ancient, and it leaves it so that like if you're a deck that needed a board to interact with to like get stuff done, like if you're like Dex or something, like you have nothing to interact with, so that leaves you like at a disadvantage. And that's like the same for a lot of decks that like have incidental value gained by like interacting with your opponent that you're missing out on because they're an empty board. And then you can try and hold up blockers, but like a lot of the times it doesn't really matter, right? Like they'll have like, oh, I can't be blocked, like in the new blue one, right?
Yeah.
Or they have, oh, if you block me, I gain like a bunch of memory, and then I can just make another guy and go again. Like, so it just doesn't matter. So like, if we just had Tamer removal in all the colors, which would be fair.
Yeah,
like
Bandai's really bad at trying to print interactive elements for uninteractive cards, and Tamers are definitely one of those like uninteractable things for the most part. They're working on it, but it's still not widespread enough to where it actually can like curb the problem, because right now that's probably contributing to a lot of hybrids' overall successes. Not only just Tamers are hard to deal with, but the fact that now hybrid decks have access to replay their Tamers even better in case they are gone is not helping the overall issue why hybrids are doing well. But we could always get into that into a completely different episode. But like,
yeah, so like
options are also one of those.
Like raising was an issue too, so that's why we saw like the reemergence of like Digimon Emperor. Like, you know, that guy's been around forever in the card game, just about, but like realistically, like never really saw too much going on for him.
Yeah, because now we have rookies
until
that
it
do
was
stuff
like
out of raising.
Yeah, now we have rookies that do stuff out of raising in start of main, which means that like your Digimon Emperor can sometimes just make them have to skip that. Very cool, very fun, except not to like lose your turn to something silly like that because you're trying to use your cards. Very unfortunate. But like before, it didn't really matter, right? Like you would be like, oh, I just raise a stack like when I'm ready, like on 5 generally. I raise my stack out, and so like Digimon Emperor just never did anything. Like it was there to maybe stop you from like dying a turn because they're gonna raise a rookie and now they'll have enough checks on board. Oh no, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I guess like my next big question is, we figured out some of the more problematic things in blue. So like we can't really do anything with Ancient. We know an idea on what to hit for Imperial and Mirage, and I don't think they're going to do anything to Magnamon. So like with those changes, would there be anything else that needs to be changed in order to try to open up the format? Because like what fills in that power vacuum, and what are like, I know it's like super hard to actually predict and estimate, but like what do you feel like would be the ramifications if those cards for those decks actually got hit to try to open things up even more? Because unfortunately, as we kind of like already alluded to, EX7, like most EX sets, is not trying to power creep the game in any way, shape, or form, and most of the decks don't seem highly competitive.
So the problem right now is that if we hit that BT11 Mirage, basically Mirage just isn't a deck, sadly. Like, and that's unfortunate. And like my reasoning for hitting it is so that they can print a new one. Like, give us another wave of Saber support. Like, because to be honest, like Thomas needs it. Like, there's a couple holes in his deck, and like if he wasn't playing that BT11 piece, like you could realistically give him some cool stuff. Like, poor Yoshino needs it the most. Keenan really needs it. Bandai, you didn't even print us Bancho Leo Burst. What happened there?
Yeah, I would have liked a Bancho Leo Burst. I was hoping for that, but unfortunately didn't get it.
So like, but there's not going to be room for it if Shine Greymon just randomly got movie support. he's the only guy that got movie support. The other characters were in the movie too, Bandai. I know that, like, you don't have the room in every set to give every guy, but, like, he also got solo stuff in the Pro Tag set. Like, why him? Like, pick somebody else.
Yeah. So, like, as far as, like, looking at kind of where the meta is, like, if we remove Imperial and if we remove basically Mirage, I think, like, right now, Mirage being the worst of the blue decks is, like, whatever. It just means I honestly don't think it would change the format that much, to be honest. I think the only thing that we would see is maybe more purple and black decks would be actually somewhat playable, even though, like, more people would probably flock to Ancient to be able to try to counter those, because bounce gets around on delete, so that's good. But as a result, maybe, like, other control-esque decks like Tyrant start getting played a little bit more, just because now we're still back to Digimon removal, and like, this format, there's still a lot of Digimon removal, but there's enough, like, option removal to kind of quell Tyrant a little bit.
Well, green needs a deck too. Like, it's a color too. I know Bandai forgets that.
Yeah, because
since they hate it.
Like, Rapid is not seen anywhere in here outside of literally Armor Vaccine, and that's about the extent of it. And I think, like, the level 5, like I said, is actually that strong, but in the meta dynamic, Rapidmon does still lose to a lot of these other decks, which is slightly unfortunate. So maybe, like, as a result, with less blue, maybe Rapid could still come back to try to counter some other decks, just because the level 5 is that strong.
Right, like, there's the possibility. It, like, opens it up, because now, if less people are on some of these blue strategies, like, even if, like you're saying, like, everybody moves, like, oh, we take all the Mirage players and we put them onto Ancient Garu, like, that's knowledge that everybody has in their bank, and it's like, oh, now I can play stuff that, like, curbs that deck more specifically. Like, and that'll kind of help, because that's how you get, like, these anti-meta, like, cool little rogue decks that can sometimes bubble up, like that one event where Gallant won because it farmed Numemons to get there. Like, that's cool. Like, who doesn't want to see a Gallant on top, right? Like, he's another big loser Pro Tag Digimon, you know?
Right. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what trying to curb those would do. If anything else, even in other colors, need to get curbed, probably something would, but I don't know. We haven't exactly had that much time with BT17, and with EX7 basically being BT17 2.0, we're probably going to have more time with it, just with a couple of other tools to try to diversify it a little bit. So hopefully EX7 can actually, like, maybe shift some playstyles and ideas, and maybe this event, more specifically the Texas Card Fest, will give more players some ideas that won't make the market incredibly stupid and inaccessible to most players, but that's just a current Bandai thing with how they're doing their pull rates. Nothing we could really do about that.
Go get your EX2 Mothers and your Shotos, and if you're a deck that didn't care about your raising, because you were, like, you know, a deck that did Ukamon shit, you can just do that, and now you have some level of protection with a Digimon that's unaffected by your opponent's removal, so that you can not die like a loser to a bunch of silly jerks, and maybe you can get stuff done.
Yeah. So we'll see what I mean, Bandai's obviously not going to be acting anywhere near soon. The next time we're probably going to get a ban and restriction list, unless it's like an emergency one, is literally going to be post-nationals, if we follow their usual trends. So whatever we get is whatever we're stuck with for quite a while, unless something is actually that toxic, which so far, from everything we've seen, nothing coming out in the future is insanely that toxic.
Yeah.
But I think this was a pretty good overall discussion. I try not to be a downer on Digimon just because I'm not enjoying this format. Like, we all have had those formats where it's just like, this is clearly not the format I was meant to win in. So, therefore, I honestly would think about taking a break if the pricing wasn't so gosh darn good for their events. So, But yeah, that's currently how I'm feeling about the game, and just because I'm not enjoying it doesn't mean others are. Um, or others are feeling. Some people obviously might feel the same way, just can't vocalize it, and some people probably are like, I love this format, because obviously they're on a deck that they like, and I am having a hard time picking that.
Well, when like my deck that I had been cultivating since BT11, and Bandai finally started to throw me a bone, even though they made me push out just about every piece from BT11 with all the new support, like doing different things. Like, sure, I was still a on delete deck, and on delete decks were already like people were leery of it because Numamon also existed in the same format that I wanted to exist in. Doesn't feel very good when you print a brand new card, Bandai, and basically tell me that like my pet deck that saw mild success is just not allowed to play.
Yeah. But hopefully things will get better, and there's more sets to look forward to, even if we're not going to
I
get
have
it
new
quick.
pet decks at the very least.
Yeah. So there's always some fun to be had, and it'll be interesting to see what actually develops and how things are going to develop, and hopefully things actually get better, because I'm not exactly enjoying it, but I think that things actually could improve based on the work that the new designer has been doing. They gave me a lot of potential faith that with another good ban and restriction list, we actually could have another really solid format, and that's what I'm kind of holding out for. That, and I still just love the mechanics of Digimon, even if we're getting closer and closer to Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think we kind of yapped long enough. This was a little bit on the longer side, but that's okay, because we had a lot of things to say, and it was a halfway decent conversation, I would think. So hopefully you all enjoyed this conversation, and if you do, you already know what to do with all of the social media stuff, and make sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever. And thank you all for watching this episode, and we will see you next time.